Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Moms on a Mission podcast. It's great to have you here. If you are in California where the fires are raging, I pray you're okay. If you're in the Midwest where I am and you're freezing, I pray you're okay there. And then, of course, on the East Coast with all the floods, there is so much going on. I pray you are okay as well. And I know that there's a lot going on, and it's hard sometimes to engage in local politics and what's happening when we're just in a survival mode. So I pray for your best right now today. Our guest today, Gabe Woolley, Representative Gabe Woolley, he just got elected into the House of Representatives in the state of Oklahoma, and he's already filed a bill, if you can believe that, House Bill 1100 in Oklahoma. And get this, the bill states that he is just proposing that evidence have to be used to make decisions on whether a child is kept from their parents or not. He says there's this word preponderance. And because of that, even if there's zero evidence, if there's just a hunch with no evidence that something's going on, children can be kept away from their parents. And he's already introduced this bill. And you might be in another state and say, well, how does this affect me? Well, let me just tell you, this is going on nationally, and you will want to know what's going on here and how you can stand up to fight this. So without further ado, please welcome to the Moms on a Mission podcast, Representative Gabe Woolley. Representative Gabe Woolley, welcome back to the Moms on a Mission podcast. It's such an honor to have you here today. Thanks for being available on the fly and being so flexible.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So you have been making waves since you were elected to our state House of Representatives in Oklahoma. And I know those listening think, oh, this is Oklahoma. This doesn't apply to me. Yes, it does. And when you hear this, you'll know why. Representative Gabe Woolley, I would love so much for you to talk about this new bill that you've already, I guess the word, what is the word? A bill that you have presented? Filed. Okay.
Yeah.
This bill that you filed, and I just want to read, you on X have been incredibly active regarding this whole situation before you were even elected. And you can share with our listeners, I believe this is probably one of the reasons why you ran, but you filed Oklahoma HB 1100. And you said on your X, this allows DHS, the Department of Human Services, to be charged with a felony of kidnapping if they don't return a child to their parents where no crime or misconduct can be proven. And you said proven in capital letters. And this is Child Protective Services more specifically. So I know you've been on a few times. So if you have not heard Gabe's story with this situation, nor if you've not heard his testimony, they both are incredibly powerful. Go to Rumble, scroll through Moms on a Mission, put that in the search bar, and then look down and find these interviews. I would strongly suggest you listen to those as well. But Gabe, tell us in a nutshell about this bill and maybe weave in your own personal story as to why you're pursuing this so actively.
Sure. Well, really, this is a bill that is seeking to hold the government accountable and to address the issue of the government being weaponized against the people. So we saw even all the way up to the presidency with President Trump, the government, Department of Justice, or the FBI, whatever it may be, different entities being weaponized against President Trump, being weaponized against other people in politics. We're seeing here, even on a local level, that the government can be weaponized against the people that it's supposed to be serving. Unfortunately, DHS, Child Protective Services, is a part of that process and a part of that issue. There can also be some other entities that could be questionable. We've had an issue with our district attorney here in Wagner County and our sheriff that might be unique to our county, or maybe it happens periodically throughout different counties, even throughout the nation. But what's more prevalent and widespread and consistent with the patterns that we're seeing is these questionable concerns with Child Protective Services or the Department of Human Services. And so why we're here even having this discussion is, I was elected to office. This is part of why I campaigned, certainly not the whole thing. I'm also a teacher. I also campaigned on holding accountability in the classroom and protecting children. I also campaigned on restoring power to the people and being responsive to what the people want. There are other things that I'll work on that are responsive to what the people want, but this is a big focus area. It's likely I'll probably file at least one bill every year revolving around DHS until we get something across the finish line.
So
Sorry.
no, you're good. I do love the fact that you are a teacher, and because there's lots of reform that's needed in that sector as well. But I think my question for you is why do you feel I just would love for you to tell our listeners, because we have listeners from all over the nation, some in Australia even, but why do you feel like this applies to everyone? Because I think it's important that people hear this and learn some things that they can do and know that this problem is not just specific to Oklahoma.
Well, I would hope that this bill, this project, this movement, Rescue Clayton, my own story, but all the stories you hear throughout Oklahoma and throughout the nation, we're just one of them, is a wake up call to that if the people put pressure on their government, and if the people use their voice, and if the people contact their legislators, and if the people peacefully protest and make their voices heard, that there is change. We saw in other areas, we have seen some progress with child protective services in Oklahoma, not ultimately the progress end of story that we may need. We have seen small steps, but we have seen progress nonetheless, and that's because of the voice that the people have used. We've seen the people in Oklahoma get things shut down from the federal government as recent as 2 weeks ago with the NITSE corridor that the federal government was trying to put all the way across through the state of Oklahoma. That was shut down because over 1,000 Oklahomans rallied and protested peacefully about the issue and said they didn't want it. So this DHS issue really is no different than that. This is a response to what the people have been asking for here in Oklahoma, even nationwide. DHS, Child Protective Services reform. So House Bill 1100 is a response to holding the government accountable, addressing government corruption, and reacting to what the people have asked for.
So as it stands now, Representative Gabe Woolley, tell us legally, at least in Oklahoma, but probably other states as well. Tell us legally what they can do with children. They go into a home, they suspect abuse, they remove the child from the home so that they can investigate, just like you would a crime scene, a bank robbery. I mean, any basic criminal activity, they tape it off, they get evidence, they inspect, they interview people, and then they make a decision. And at the end of the day, if, say, let's just use the bank for example, if somebody is suspected to rob a bank, and then after the interview or after all of the investigations, like, nope, no, they didn't, the person doesn't stay in jail just in case. It's not insurance, right? You know, they go free. Sadly, sometimes after the government's been weaponized against people, their image, their reputation is tarnished. But talk to us today in this state anyway of Oklahoma, if the parents or whomever's being investigated have been proven innocent and proven by a court of law, how on earth can the child still be withheld from the parents?
Yeah, and there's many cases, there's many avenues. So the thing to look at is innocent until proven guilty, meaning you have to have evidence of guilt. So the problem here is that we have seen some cases where charges have been dismissed or dropped, but DHS took a child because of those charges that no longer exist and still has the child. How is that possible? How is that right? If you took a child because of charges or because of accusations and those charges are dropped or dismissed, how can you continue to keep the child? If you need to keep the child for their safety, you better still have charges filed. And so it's similar here. If there's no evidence, if the court cannot actually produce evidence that a child is being abused, how can they keep your child away from you? The reality is they can, because what we've seen time and time again is that DHS seems to do whatever they want. It feels like there's no accountability, story after story, time after time. But this bill, House Bill 1100, really says that there needs to be clear and convincing evidence. There's a term, and it's called preponderance. And the court uses this, and judges use this when they look at what DHS is recommending. For the record, DHS recommends to the judge. The judge is the one that executes the decision, forces that, and law enforcement reacts to what the judge has done or what the law has said. And so, but the issue is the DHS is very heavily influencing the judge. And in fact, I've never seen a case where the judge has not sided with DHS. As soon as DHS speaks, it's almost game over. I mean, it seems like they have the last word. There might be some cases out there. I haven't come across any. It's always the opposite that I'm hearing consistently. But House Bill 1100 removes the word preponderance, which means that there only has to be a 51% likelihood that something happened for them to take your child or to keep your child away from you. I don't know who determines what likelihood means. I don't know who determines the scale of 51%. Um, I'm a teacher. That's an F. I mean, that's failing, if you look
Wow,
at,
yes.
and so this bill, House Bill 1100 here in Oklahoma, takes out the word preponderance and replaces it with clear and convincing evidence. So if the court can determine based on preponderance that a child is being abused or neglected, DHS can act. Now it would say if the court determines with clear and convincing evidence that a child has been abused or neglected, then they can act. That really puts hopefully a balance back on the scales of innocent until proven guilty. You have to have some sort of evidence to keep the case open, to keep the child removed until you come to a conclusion.
When I hear this, and you probably saw my comment on your X feed, and that is how sad that we as a state, a country, or whatever have to create a bill to say, to support the whole concept of innocent until proven guilty, and to support the relationships of children with their families, and say, hey, that's a pretty devastating thing to pull a kid away from their parent. You better make sure that you have evidence. And this is just my gut, but I feel like the chances of parents abusing children, which we know that happens, of course,
Right.
but there are checks and balances, there are laws, right? Why do we just, what in your opinion, why do we nationally and even in the state of Oklahoma assume that the DHS, Department of Human Services, is never nefarious, is always doing the right thing every single time? I mean, when you look at our founding fathers, they set up our nation with checks and balances, because Washington and all these guys even said, like, that if a government is unchecked, it becomes tyrannical. That's what power does. And so our whole nation, our government was created with checks and balances. Why would this be any different?
Now, the Department of Human Services is an entity of government. Mind you, that we don't elect anyone in DHS, so it could be considered a bureaucratic form of government that the people didn't choose. Now, you do elect your governor, and the governor appoints the head of DHS. I'm not opposed to the idea of considering the option of putting the head of DHS on the ballot, just like our superintendent of education is. Um, and so there can be arguments made on either side for that. But I do think it puts the power back into the hands of the people more directly if you put the head of DHS on the ballot, the head of any major government entity on the ballot for the people to choose. Of course, they would filter in and find qualified candidates that have the right experience and background, and only those options would end up on the ballot. But you're right. I mean, this is a tyrannical form of government in the way that it's seen. Unfortunately, what I have seen time and time again is the judges always siding with DHS, and then the people responding and having an issue with that. So it seems like the people versus the government. I also have to recognize that if you've worked in a certain area for so long, it can give you tunnel vision, for you to think that there's nothing wrong with the system. I'm the professional here. I'm right. They're wrong. That's a scary place to be. Really, at the end of the day, this fight against Child Protective Services, my personal family's experience with Rescue Clayton at rescueclayton.com. This is a battle of pride. This is a battle of someone somewhere was not willing to admit that they made a mistake, or someone somewhere did not look at both sides equally and let the evidence speak for itself, or someone somewhere just took somebody else's opinion instead of, okay, now I've heard the district attorney's side of the story. Let me go to the other side, balance the scale, and then make a decision when I've equally heard both sides. We have approached our Attorney General Gettner Drummond with that argument. We have approached our Governor Kevin Stitt and asked them, and all I've asked them, Governor Stitt, when I was face to face with him, and all I have said and pressed with people in authority is that please just reach out to the other side and also ask for that side of the story. And then when you've heard both sides look at the evidence or lack thereof and speak for itself, then that unfortunately was never the response, because we have not received a phone call from the governor to have that conversation with my parents, the ones who are directly involved with this. And I did sit in a meeting with the governor for over an hour and really try to press for that to happen, just to hear both sides of the story. I didn't ask for him to expunge the record from the false accusations. I did not ask for him to give Clayton back to my parents, even though I believe that he should. I offered the option to be considered of them putting Clayton with my sister, his aunt and uncle, elementary school teachers who work with children, own a home, mortgage, fully equipped to take care of them. I just asked for considerations to try to balance that scale and to try to bring back that right to defend yourself. And unfortunately, I did not get a appropriate response from Governor Kevin Stitt.
This is so sickening to my soul because it is so 180 degrees diametrically opposed to our Constitution federally and within our state. And I wanted to ask you, Gabe, I have you share with our listeners. I know we don't have time to go into the whole story, but to think that these agencies can never be nefarious, can never be full of pride, can never do the wrong thing. It's like there's supposedly these expert witnesses and the judges just defer to them automatically, rubber stamp their decision. I don't know if it's because, like you said, tunnel vision, or if they're just, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean, but maybe they're a little lazy and they're like, hey, this is why we have you, so we can defer to you. But what happens when the people are experiencing abuse from them? I mean, just to rubber stamp everything they do, it is in no way American and is no way constitutionally correct. And it does not protect the people. And so I was just curious, Gabe, as you've talked to, obviously you just told us the disappointing answer from our Governor Stitt, but what have been some of the things you're hearing about this when you're proposing this House Bill 1100? I mean, if I were in a House of Representatives or in local government, I'd be like, this is a no brainer. Like, let's use evidence before we make a decision. What has been the feedback you've received?
Well, the issue that some people have made, we're seeing polar differences when I talk to the people, citizens on social media or in person, versus when I talk to people who are employed by the government. That there's a stark difference in their responses, and there are things to consider. There is a chance that this bill will be amended and make some small changes and try to get at least a piece of it across the finish line. If that's what we need to do, we'll do whatever we take to chip away at that mountain. But I'm not going to let go of the essence or the principle of innocent until proven guilty, of there needing to be evidence before treating people like they're guilty, and taking their children as absolutely a punishment to people when you consider the bond between a parent and child. And I also recognize there is a place for child protective services to protect when necessary, but we've gotten so far from that, and we need to balance those scales again. But I'm getting some positive responses again from the people. Other people in influence that could have influence or say over this bill's success or failure, I would say there have been some questions raised. There have been some concerns about, if we attack child protective services like this, how are they going to protect the children that need it? This is not an abolish DHS bill. This is a small piece of reform. And this is putting the blindfold back on Lady Justice so that she's not seeing one side or the other and favoring it. She's blindly letting the evidence speak for itself instead of, uh, you know, the judge or the person in power being influenced by outside perspectives on this. So, this bill has a long way to go. This is only the beginning. It has to get through committee. And then, of course, the new House structure here in Oklahoma, there's now a double committee threshold every bill has to go through. So committee, floor, Senate committee, floor, governor's desk. By the time that it reaches that area, if it ever does, Governor Stitt will still be the governor. So we will see what happens there, and there's a long ways to go. But what I'm hearing is that some people have concerns, I would say, with this bill. Some other elected officials. It lets me think that it's going to be an uphill battle to get this bill passed, or maybe that we need to make some amendments somewhere along the way. But I still think there's a ways to go for the wake-up call for other people to realize the severity of the situation, that we do need reform at DHS.
Which I think, the Bible talks about in Romans 8:28, that all things work together for the good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And he didn't cause this, but he can use this to be a blessing to not just, your family, your community, the state, but the nation. And I pray and hope that this gets national coverage, because the very fact that you have to create a bill, that a decision will be based on evidence instead of what was that word? Preponderance?
Preponderance, a
I mean,
51% chance it might be true.
for me, when I hear you say that, it I think one of the reasons why it concerns me the most is because whenever you use subjective language like that, you really can do whatever you want with that, and I appreciate the fact that our state is really wanting to protect children, but with that word in there, that might have been the heart behind adding or inserting that into the bill. But when we see that word weaponized against families and most specifically the children, I think that has to be looked at. And I would think, Gabe, anybody who's heard your story and has seen the evidence as it relates to Rescue Clayton at rescueclayton.com, you would think that once they hear that evidence, that maybe their tune would change. Have you seen anything happen like that?
So, in my conversations with the governor and with people where we have presented him with the option to look at that evidence, we have asked them to do so, and then ultimately leading to no response, which leads me to believe or to have to speculate. My own conclusion is that they didn't end up looking at the evidence, or that they didn't follow through with something somewhere. I can't say that for sure, but what I can say is that we have asked people in power who work for the government to hear both sides of a story, as should always be done, and then to contact us to receive evidence, not our opinion, not hearsay, court documents, transcripts from the court, documented under oath, all of these things. And then we have not gotten a call back from anyone over the course of 7 years. So,
Oh, yeah, that's a minor little detail to throw in there. 7 years this has been
in
going
March,
on.
yep, yep.
And I think this is one of the most powerful parts of this story, not just a story, it's your history, your family history. Could you tell our listeners, Gabe, the investigator driving to the home, um, again, go back and listen to the story, but one child passed away. Most are thinking it's like the SIDS, right? I mean, but
Mhm.
anyway, regardless, so one child passes away, and the investigator driving to the house before looking at any evidence said what, Gabe?
Right. So this investigator, Danny Elliott in Wagner County, Oklahoma, his assistant was already on the scene, and EMS was already on the scene with the ambulance. And they had both said that it looks like a case of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, when my nephew Elijah had passed away. My sister had abused drugs while she was pregnant with him, so that was a part of the equation that was really not considered, actually. And over the phone, Danny Elliott said, "There's no such thing as SIDS. I know I'm on my way to a murder scene." And he hadn't even arrived yet or seen anything. So it was predetermined. You hear about premeditated murder where someone plans out the murder. This was premeditated false accusation, or premeditated accusations, I should say, which turned out to be false accusations with a huge lack of evidence, to the point where the district attorney had to drop the charges because there were no evidence. And even after
Wow.
charges were dropped, DHS, Child Protective Services, has still never given Clayton back in almost 7 years, and he was taken because of those charges. So how can you have cause and effect, and then you remove cause and effect still take place?
It's illogical and abusive. I mean, it's abuse of power. When was that, Gabe? When did they say, hey, there's no evidence here? So how long has your nephew been removed from his family after there was no evidence found?
Charges were dropped in 2021. So we've hit 4 years since charges have been dropped, ultimately 7 years for everything in March. But since the charges were dropped, yeah, 4 years. So for 4 years, they can continue to keep your child away from you with no evidence. If there was still evidence in play that the district attorney would be able to use or had confidence in using, I'm convinced that he wouldn't have dropped the charges.
Yeah, because there was a narrative that they wanted to just follow. It seems like no matter what. But so for folks who are listening today, I'm all about action, like educate, awake, and activate. So those in Oklahoma, I would love for you to share what can we do as Oklahomans who are not directly affected by this horrific implementation of our law and this word preponderance. if we're not directly affected by that, what can we do in Oklahoma, and then nationally and even internationally? What can folks do in their local areas to support the fact that evidence, particularly DHS and Child Protective Services, that evidence needs to be used before a child can be removed from the home?
Yeah, they need to use their voice. We got the NITSE federal corridor in Oklahoma shut down because over a thousand Oklahomans showed up in one room and protested that. That's a result of the people using their voice and the elected officials forced to respond to that. So I would say continue to look into some stories and concerns with DHS, Child Protective Services, or the courts, judges, everybody playing a role, district attorneys, and look at, does this really operate under the guise of innocent until proven guilty, or is there a pre-assumption of guilt operating off of that, and then we're throwing a child into DHS and good luck ever getting them back because of how broken that system ever is. So we need to ask ourselves the questions: is this really innocent until proven guilty, and if not, where do we need to make the changes to put the blindfold back on Lady Justice? And then I would say start contacting your elected officials and asking them to support bills like HB 1100, or ask them to work with that legislator to make it better, or to do what you need to do to work with this legislator to make sure that bill gets passed. Help them amend it, help them make the changes they need, because we, the people, want to see this, if that's something you believe.
Yeah, that innocent until proven guilty, and use evidence to make decisions. I think most can agree with that, I would think. But so locally, we could reach out to our own representatives and say, hey, we know that this bill was filed yesterday. I believe it was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And say, hey, we want you to support this in whatever way you can, and we'll be watching you.
Yeah, I would
Thanks.
definitely say, I would say read the bill first, see where you agree with it. If you believe that, make that argument, and you're welcome. I mean, everyone's always welcome to contact their legislators. If it were my legislator and they had pushed back on it, I would probably then ask them, well, what can we do to see if something like this gets across? What amendments can you offer? What amendments could be offered and made to help it? This should really be a collective effort. Obviously, we have 150 people in the elected positions, the governor, the House, and the Senate. So it can be a collective effort to make sure that we're protecting children. There's plenty of other bills that other legislators are working on that I hope that fellow legislators can support. But legislators are supposed to respond to the people, certainly. So everybody has a right to contact their legislator, and continue using your voice as the people and make sure we have a response to that, according to what's just, what's true, what's honorable.
Yeah. I think you have hit the nail on the head, and that is showing up and speaking out and not being governed by fear or comfort or laziness or busyness or distractions, and just showing up. I mean, that those 1,000 people that showed up like that to that one meeting. I mean, that probably was a few hours of their evening, but look what just a few hours did. Just, and sometimes you don't even have to speak, just being there. I mean, numbers represent some power when it's, needing to be statements need to be made, and the pushback is needing to happen. So I mean, that was probably some of the best 3 to 4 hours or however long that meeting was that these people could have invested to push back.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there were protests even before that around the same topic. There was strategy and there was organization and there was collectiveness and unity, and being united and speaking up for what was right. And there was a result because of that. And this story with DHS, Child Protective Services, is gaining more traction. And I believe we'll get more behind that. But this bill just calls it like it is. House Bill 1100 says that if there's no clear and convincing evidence and DHS continues to keep a child away from the guardian that they were taken from without any clear and convincing evidence of abuse or a crime, then whoever's responsible for not returning the child could be charged with the felony of kidnapping.
Wow. I mean, that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. I think because it involves children, they create this gray area to add, maybe they feel like an extra layer of insulation, to protect them from a harmful home or family, which sadly do exist.
Right.
But again, our whole nation was founded, the innocent until proven guilty, and we're not supposed to have these tyrannical courts who just reinforce investigators saying that. I mean, there is no SIDS. I'm sorry, that's stupid. There is SIDS. There is sudden
Yeah.
infant death syndrome. So to say that is, first of all, not a very educated response, number one. And number two, to already have an agenda going in like that is so nefarious. And I'm just, I'm in awe that this bill needs to even be written. But Gabe, I want to say, I mean, you could have just rolled over and just been like, you know what, the government, what am I going to do? But you were a teacher and you said, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to run for office and I will be the change. If I can't motivate somebody to change, if I can't get the governor to do it, by gosh, I'll go out and I will be the change. And so my hat's off to you, Gabe, because you are such a testament to uh, General Flynn. He so beautifully and succinctly said, local action makes a national impact. And if you want to see national change, get out and do something locally. And that's what you've done. I mean, clearly this affected you at home, but also being a teacher. I mean, there are lots of areas where that needs to be overhauled, if you will. And
Yeah.
so that has nothing to do with this particular situation. So I'm so grateful for your voice and your willingness to serve, because it's not very encouraging monetarily when you serve, and it's a lot of time. And so I just want to say thank you so much, not just for our state but for our nation, because you are an example of what all Americans should do, to stand up and to protect our constitutional rights.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think a huge important piece of that is not being afraid to stand up and also exercising humility.
Oh, yeah, that's, you did mention that pride, was part of the problem.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. So, how can folks reach out to you? I know some listening might say, "Hey, I want to make a difference in my community, in my state, in my town. How can I do that? Where would they find you, and what's the best way to connect with you and support you?"
Yeah, I try to be very active on social media and responsive. I would say reach out to me on X and follow me on X. It's Gabe G Woolley, GABEGWOOLLEY. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Obviously, as a state legislator, my contact information is public as well, but certainly reach out to me, follow me, and so you can stay updated with the progress of this bill and many others, and really what's happening in the state of Oklahoma, and make an educated decision based off of, again, hearing both sides of the story.
Absolutely. And they can message you there on X, right? And ask you
Yeah.
questions.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Well, Representative Gabe Woolley, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you so much for what you're doing for not just our towns, our state, but even the whole nation. I'm believing that more states will learn about this story and support in any way they can. So thank you for what you're doing, and God bless you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And one way we can become activated also for our own family, not just going to school board meetings, not just speaking out, not doing just that, but also investing in gold and silver. And, I've talked to a lot of friends about this, and most people are like, oh, they just don't know much about it. Let me tell you what. The Bible says that we can get wisdom from God. I'm asking you to pray about this and ask God for wisdom. Also, the Bible says in Haggai that gold and silver are the Lord's. And so, we want to protect ourselves. We want to diversify, right? We want to have hard assets like land and things of that nature, but we also want to have gold and silver. So this is what I do every single week or every 2 weeks. I order a few ounces of silver and just start stockpiling it, because the paper money, it is fiat currency, and it's an IOU essentially. It's debt. This is real money. So today, call the number on the screen, give me a call. I am a broker for Miles Franklin. It's one of the top gold and silver companies in the nation. It's been around for over 30 years, and they have the best prices, literally. I mean, they can beat almost anybody's price in the nation. Give them a call and start diversifying today and protect the legacy of your family. And if you don't know a lot about gold and silver, call me. Let's have a conversation, and let's start thinking of ways that you can start protecting the financial legacy of your family. I really want to share a few more thoughts about this conversation with Gabe. I hope that this story motivates you to become involved, whether it is with Child Protective Services, whether it is just going to your local school board, whether it's just delving into Gabe's X account and following this and learning what he's doing. And, I believe, like I said in Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And I believe he can use these horrific things and turn them around for good to protect other children. And so I think sometimes we look at this and go, it doesn't affect me. I'll listen to another episode and get involved where it does affect me. I'm telling you, a nefarious government, overreaching government, it's going to affect us. If we don't notice it, you will at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And so I just encourage you to get involved and just to see and know what's going on and start attending different things like a school board meeting or a city hall meeting, just to be aware. Knowledge is power, right? There's a reason why that's a saying. So I just encourage you to do that. Another thing I wanted to talk about today is these fires that are raging in California. It has just been so disturbing. I don't know if y'all have followed this story locally, or I'm sorry, on mainstream media or on social media, but I saw one story on social media. You probably all saw it, with a gentleman in his house, and he's looking out his kitchen in California, and all the windows are encased in glass, and you can literally see the flames are getting ready to lap up his house. And I I just I wonder, I feel like there are two schools of thought on this. Like, one is, well, that's California. They deserve that. They voted these radical environmental leftists into power. And so this is what happens when you elect those people. But I just can't find anywhere in the Bible where Jesus is like, oh, well, you sinned, so deal with the consequences. My grace is not sufficient for you. No, the Bible says his grace is sufficient for us. And so I think of us as Christ followers, as Christians. What would God have us to do for these Californians? What would he do? What would Jesus do? And I think first and foremost, we do not pray enough. We see it, we feel sorry maybe if we're on that first side of the fence, we're like, sorry, you elected these people, you're going to burn. I just don't think that's biblical. Yes, natural consequences do happen, but what can we do and what should we do according to the word of God? And that is pray for them, pray for intervention. This is not God's will that they burn to the ground. I mean, it's just not okay. In fact, I wanted to show you, or I talked to you rather, about a gentleman who is a former Army veteran. Jim Clegg is his name. And so I saw him today on Fox, and he was an Army veteran, and he saved his Palisades home with his sprinklers and hoses. And I just thought that this was incredible. This man is completely emotionally moved by all this, as you can imagine. And not only did he save his own home, but he saved homes below his hill by dousing and drenching his home with water and turning on his sprinklers. And I mean, he started crying. I mean, this is a man who, served our country, and it's devastating. And so I just want to encourage you to pray and just to think about, I know some people have seen that Hollywood sign too, right? Like, it's burning and it looks almost apocalyptic. And we can just go down that trail like, oh, well, this is what happens when you elect these people. But there are good, wonderful, godly people in the state of California. And so I wanted to have my friend and my producer, Ines Cyrus. Ines, I would love for you to weigh in on this, because you used to live in California.
Yes, and I'll agree with everything you said, and I will also add this. As a human rights activist, Miriam, my priority has always been human society. I will even go as far as those who did vote for these Democrats. Just listen, did they make a mistake? We think they did. Did they have better options? No. Let's be fair for a minute. It's been a long time. As a former resident of Los Angeles County, we didn't have much options when it came to elections, because people have given up on LA or California or New York or Oregon or other blue states. We don't have good people who are running against these Democrats either. Let's be fair. We have given up on America when we give up on, oh, it's Michigan. Michigan's gone. It's Islamabad now. I personally took the initiative to go to Dearborn, Michigan, and give a speech to inform people of what Islam is. But it's not fair to sit comfortably, even though we're freezing here in Midwest, to sit here comfortably and say they deserve what they get. First of all, brushing, as you said, brushing the entire town because we think they all voted for Democrats. Did they? How come we're comfortably out here talking about election fraud in federal level? How do you know they did vote for these people? How do you know it wasn't a stolen? We don't have enough fact to sit here now because there's more LGBTQ banners running in LA doesn't mean they all believe in it. And even if they do, let's now go from humanitarian into the Christian point of views. We're to hate the sin, not the sinner. To have such a rage and such a hate to ever celebrate one's life destroyed is not biblical. And I am ashamed every time I see a Christian out there putting posts out at this is our opportunity to grab them, this is our opportunity to flip California, to turn a disaster of one's tragic life into an opportunity. I believe it's not biblical, and I'm against it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I will say again, Romans 8:28, you all will have that scripture memorized by the end of the show today, but Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good. I believe that God can use this. And, I know there's a massive push today we've been seeing for Governor Newsom to resign. And, maybe God's going to use this to help rebuild California. But I mean, in no way I believe personally that God, wishes this on that whole state. But, and you could say, look at the fire chief and all of these officials, you've got LGBTQ, you have, this DEI push. And when you're pushing to advance this agenda and this narrative, you don't have the best, folks always. I mean, sometimes, yes, but sometimes when you use that as your lens, if you will, or your reasoning to hire somebody and you don't use meritocracy, well, then you're going to have issues like this. You're going to have issues in the Secret Service and the FBI when you're advancing a certain narrative and you're not using qualifications and meritocracy to elect these people. They're going to do things wrong and people will die because of that. But that doesn't mean we should be okay with that and support that. And I also wanted to bring up the fact that, so, like you said, Inez, I didn't even really think about the fact that this could be these could have been the best options they had, or maybe they did vote for somebody else. And we're almost like just judging the situation when we don't really know a lot about it.
Correct. And again, I was there. I saw the list. I saw who's running against whom, and there weren't options. There weren't much options of, I know we like to call them rhinos, but it's lesser evil. And again, unfortunately, because people have given up on these areas, they don't go out of their way to run. It's either, oh, what's the point? I'm going to lose anyways. Or it's the whole point of, oh no, I'd rather just move to a red estate. I'm guilty of that myself. I moved out of California for the fact that I knew I can't change the Second Amendment laws. And literally on the street on 4th of July, daylight, I was attacked by 2 Pakistani men and police wasn't willing to even file the charges. I had to get out of there to keep myself safe because they wouldn't give me a CCW. I couldn't have a weapon. I couldn't protect myself. I couldn't even file complaint against them. I left. I'm one of those people who gave up and left, but I did it to save my life. It's a little different. And I didn't have a husband who had to move his job. I didn't have children who had to leave their friends behind or change their school or their comfort. So different scenarios to different people. And we have some really strong voices coming from Los Angeles, California. Listen, we have David Horowitz Freedom Center headquarters in Los Angeles. We have Dr. Jamie Glasshoff. We have Daniel Greenfield. There are patriot conservatives in California trying. So again, it goes back to, are we in a position to judge them? Or do we prefer to turn this into politics because for 4 years we were oppressed by Democrats? That's my take on it, Miriam. Today, a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives are turning this into full-on politics with zero feelings involved, zero values involved, as Americans, as Christians, as humans, doesn't matter, because the basics are basics. If you look into our Constitution, into Declaration of Human Rights and Bible, you see the bases. They're the same. So they're looking away because they are angry, they are tired, they're frustrated with the oppression of 4 years of Democrat ruling in federal government. It's time to snap out of it. We cannot become them. Miriam, we're becoming them.
Yeah, man, that's so well said. And let's be honest, the brush was not remember the environmental regulations. I mean, they were supposed to trim that brush. They were supposed to, I mean, they could have let the water come in and fall down into these cities, and the reservoirs are empty. These are facts. And environmental regulations definitely contributed to this, but at the end of the day, I hope and pray that we'll look at this from a lens that, what if that were your sister? What if that were your cousin or your aunt or uncle out in California, and the fires, were engulfing them? How would you feel that? And I really think that's the question. When it really starts affecting us personally, I think it becomes more of a personal issue, and we can't be just so removed from the situation. Go, oh well, that's what happens when you elect radical left progressive, governor and fire chief and things of that nature. Yes, they contribute to it, but we need to help these people, and then we can support, handling it in a more logical and conservative way. I know I was sharing this with you, Ines, before we started, but I was just watching on Fox. They were talking about the percentage of containment, and you were talking about how that could possibly change. But the Eaton fire is 35% contained. The Hearst fire, 799 acres, 97% contained. It says the Auto fire is 100% contained. But this number was daunting to me, and that's the Palisades fire. And as of today, it is on the day of our recording, it is 17% contained. And Ines, I know you were saying before we started that the winds are, and I did hear that the winds are supposed to shift again, and you were suggesting and predicting that it's going to be less contained soon.
Yes, but so tonight, sometime tonight or early tomorrow morning, the Santa Ana winds are going to pick back up, which is going to expand the fire again. Now, the best way to explain this, I am no expert in weather, by the way, nor am I a firefighter, but just the basic knowledge is every time part of this fire is picked up, it's going with the speed of the wind. However, it is not burning with the speed of the wind, meaning by the time it drops back on the ground, the heat of it has not calmed down. If it was burning on, let's say, 482 degrees, maybe it's down to 452 degrees, but it's still on a burning level. Wherever it lands, depend on the situation of the ground, it could add to the expansion of the fire. So there's a good chance by tomorrow night we might look at that 17% containment might drop to 12, 10, 13, depending on where they land and how long these winds are going to go at it. Now, one thing I want to bring up that you mentioned, Miriam, to expand on what you said, the whole, what if this was your sister, your nephew, your niece, your cousin, whatever. Here's how I'm going to say this, and this is very unpopular, and I am giving you my unfiltered thoughts. This is not on Miriam. It's coming from my brain. Listen, if we want to be that ruthless, we could sit here, which some Democrats do. We could say a man or a woman who signed up and joined the military knew what they're getting into. They voted for possibly their death. Would you accept that as a person? When they bring a flag back to a family, you sympathize with them. You have empathy for them. It's the same scenario. I know people are going to try to differentiate, Miriam, but it's the same. Every morning when we wake up, We make our own choices, and we're adults to know it does have consequences. But because one choice turned into another, listen, America is all about redemption. We're all about comebacks, right? We're all
Yeah.
about addiction is illness, and we have to give them a chance. Listen, the person, I don't believe in that. I don't think addiction is an illness. I think addiction is a choice that has turned into a habit, right?
Okay,
If you're
I have to disagree with you on that, but only I do believe there's a choice element, but there has been some data to show that an addict's brain actually is different. So I do. It's only because I've been personally affected by this and I've studied it, but I think there is a little bit. I think it's a mixed bag just from the research I've done.
I completely understand where you're coming from, but let's dissect that for 1 second. And again, myself, remember the price for me to be handed over to a man by my father was 1 month of opium use. That,
Uh,
not saying, no, I am saying it was a combination of allowance by Allah for him to do it, plus the fact that he could get 1 month of opium for free and get high every day without worrying about it. I have
yeah,
been affected by addiction as well, but the point is, yes, a brain of an addict is different when he becomes an addict. Before becoming an addict, it was a choice. The first time,
absolutely,
and that's what
absolutely,
I'm saying. Yes,
absolutely.
it's not just that addiction. Anything we do. Me and you, we are very much, woman of career oriented mind, right? But we chose that. Right now, our brain is processing that way by nature because it's been so long.
Yeah.
But it was a choice. We chose to become involved with our careers and build something out of it. I can't sit here and say my brain just works that way. I'm a workaholic. I'm an addict myself. I'm a workaholic. But it was my choice to dive into this addiction. I'll take responsibility for that. So, but bottom line is, if we want to play that game, then we're going to have to play it with every game. Anybody who chose to destroy themselves, we should say, well, it was their choice. I have no sympathy. If
Yeah.
somebody decide to take their life, are you going to really tell them, well, it's your choice, let me hand you the weapon? No, you're going to try to talk them out of it. It's the same thing what's happening in LA. Either they chose to pick these leaders or not. They are humans. They have made a mistake or not. We do not get to celebrate their demise because they made a choice we don't agree with.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, as I've always said on this show, on Moms on a Mission, and with my friends, and to you, Inez, and that is God is love. And true love is praying for these people and doing what we can to support them. And, we just don't have any biblical support to, snub our nose and go, "Ooh, sorry, you're going to have to burn." I mean, there's just nothing biblical to support that narrative. And so I just encourage folks to pray, first and foremost, to pray for those in California, pray for divine intervention, pray for the winds to die down. I mean, the Bible says that the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man or woman, it availeth much. And you either believe God or you don't. It's really that simple. Our whole salvation with God is based on faith. And it's based on the word of God. And that's what the Bible says, that our prayers are powerful. I mean, things are happening in the supernatural realm. We are spirits. We have a soul. We live in a body. And so we are spirit driven, and this world is spirit driven. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. So pray, 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 and then read the Bible. Know what the Bible says, because the Bible also says that the word of God is alive and active and sharper than a two-edged sword and accomplishes the purpose for which God sent it. And so pray for Californians, pray for our leaders, pray for those who are trying to put these fires out, guys, because that is the most important thing that we can do. And that is love, is to pray for these people. So thank you all so much for tuning in today. Ines, thank you for weighing in on this. I so appreciate and value you as a human being and your thoughts and your research on these matters. Thank you so much. And God bless y'all, and continue to pray for these people and have a great day.